You know, Sonny, some men reach the twilight of their lives with a few dollars in their pocket, and not much else to show for it, except the love they gave their family. That was me, Samuel Turner. Retired shop teacher, widower, living in a creaky little house in Springfield, Missouri, where the best company you could get was a mug of black coffee and the ghost of your late wife drifting through the morning light. My daughter, Madison, my only child, my pride, she'd been the center of my world since her first breath. That's why when she burst through my front door one afternoon, flanked by her fiancé, Tyler, I should have known trouble was following behind. Madison's high heels clicked against my old kitchen tile, and Tyler, all confident smiles and designer watches, flopped onto my favorite recliner like he was already king of the castle. "Dad, we need to talk about something important," Madison started, her voice sugar-sweet but edged with tension. I braced myself. When she was a girl, that tone meant another broken window or a poor math grade. Now it meant something a lot costlier. Tyler leaned in. "Mr. Turner, we're really counting on your help to make this wedding special. We want it at the Grandview Hotel downtown. The whole thing, reception, band, open bar, the works." I swallowed hard. "How much are we talking?" Madison clasped her hands. $50,000, Dad. That's the minimum for everything we want. My pension barely covered my groceries and utility bills. I felt my shoulders sag, but all I could see was the hope in my daughter's eyes. "Madison, honey, I don't have that kind of money. Not lying around." Her face fell, but Tyler picked up the slack, turning on the old salesman's charm. "You could take out a loan for the rest, Mr. Turner. The bank loves pensioners like you. You're steady. It's an investment in family." I looked down at my hands, these hands that built her childhood swing set, fixed her first car, worked overtime every Christmas so she'd never feel less than anyone else. Now they shook as I clutched my coffee cup. "Dad, you've always said you'd do anything for me," Madison whispered, her voice cracking. "This is my dream. I want it to be perfect. Mom would have wanted that too. That's the thing about love, it doesn't always make sense. Sometimes it makes fools of men." "I'll see what I can do," I said quietly, and she hugged me so tight I almost believed this was just about love, not money. Tyler straightened his jacket and smiled. "We'll need to know by next week. The venue has a waiting list." When they left, the house was too quiet. I sat there in the kitchen, staring at the old calculator I'd dragged out of the junk drawer. All my savings added up to just under 30 grand, less than I'd hoped. I didn't sleep that night. Numbers rattled in my head, marching like ants across every dream. The next morning, I put on my best shirt and went to First Federal Bank on Main Street. It hadn't changed much in 30 years. Same marble floors, same brass lamps, same feeling of being smaller than your worries. The loan officer, Mr. Vasquez, was young enough to be my grandson but smiled like he'd seen it all before. He glanced at my pension stubs and nodded. "You're approved, Mr. Turner. At your age, we can offer a 7.5% rate. 5-year term." I did the math. I'd be 75 by the time it was paid off, if I made it that long. But what's a man's comfort compared to his only daughter's happiness? When I called Madison to give her the good news, her shriek nearly broke my eardrum. "Dad, you're amazing! You have no idea how much this means to me. We'll come by later to work out the details." That afternoon, I handed over the paperwork and tried to act like mortgaging my golden years for one day of celebration was the most natural thing in the world. Tyler was all grins. "You're a real hero, Sam. But there was one thing I wanted. I'd like to invite someone special to the wedding. Just one seat at the reception, for an old friend who's meant a lot to me." Madison hesitated. "Dad, we already finalized the guest list." "The caterer," Tyler cut in. "You're paying, so sure, we'll think about it. But we've got a vision. And it's our day." It stung, but I nodded. The man who pays still gets put at the kids' table, I thought. That was the first time I wondered if maybe all this wasn't about love at all. But I kept quiet. That's what fathers do. And that's how it all began. A week passed in a blur of anxious phone calls and late-night calculations. Every day brought another text from Madison, or a polite but pushy email from Tyler. The caterer needed a deposit. The florist wanted to schedule a tasting. The hotel's event planner sent me a bill that made my old heart skip. My retirement fund, scraped together over 4 decades, vanished in a matter of days. I sold a few things too, tools from my workshop, my old coin collection, even the gold watch Sarah had given me on our 20th anniversary. Each transaction felt like giving up another piece of myself, but I told myself it was worth it. My daughter's happiness was all that mattered, wasn't it? That's what I'd always believed. That's what Sarah would have said, at least, that's what I imagined, alone in the quiet at night. The house felt emptier every day. No phone calls except from vendors and bankers. No visits except for when Madison or Tyler needed my signature or my credit card. Even the neighbors noticed I was fading into the wallpaper. "Everything all right, Sam?" Mrs. Hendricks asked one morning as I shuffled out for the mail. "Haven't seen you at bingo in weeks." I lied, of course. "Just busy with the wedding, you know how it is." She patted my arm and went inside. I stood in the driveway, feeling older than I had in years. Finally, the big planning meeting arrived, a Saturday afternoon in late March. Madison breezed in, talking a mile a minute about seating charts and specialty cocktails. Tyler tagged along, always glued to his phone, barely looking up except to ask about money. "We want the premium bar package, Dad," Madison said, tapping away on her iPad. "Open bar all night. And the band just quoted us 10 grand. They're from Nashville, really famous, supposedly." Tyler grinned. "It's an investment in memories, Mr. Turner. People will talk about this night for years." I did some quick math. "That's a lot of money, Maddie. Maybe we could go with a DJ." She rolled her eyes the way she used to when I told her to do her homework. "Dad, this isn't the prom. It's my wedding. Simon's family is expecting something sophisticated." Simon. Sometimes I caught myself using Tyler's old name out of habit. "He changed it for business reasons," he said. "Sounds more professional, Dad. More American." The little things kept changing, one after another. "All right," I said, "but let's keep things reasonable." Tyler looked at me over his phone. "Don't worry, Sam. You're doing great. We're grateful." He didn't sound grateful. He sounded impatient. And something about the way he said Sam instead of Dad burned more than I cared to admit. By April, the wedding machine was in full swing. Every other day was a new crisis, more money needed, another urgent deposit, another venue adjustment. Madison's texts became curt and businesslike. "Dad, we need $2,000 for the flowers by Friday. Dad, the band's manager needs your signature. Dad, don't forget the suit rental. We want everything coordinated." If I offered a suggestion, a cheaper menu, maybe a smaller cake, she'd smile tight and say, "Dad, I appreciate your input, but we have a vision." Tyler never even pretended. "We want our friends talking about this for years, not about how we cut corners." After a while, I stopped arguing. I started to feel less like a father and more like a sponsor, an ATM with a pension and a pulse. The little apartment I'd called home for decades seemed to shrink as my savings shrank. Nights got colder, even in spring. Sarah's photo on the mantel looked back at me, her smile sadder than I remembered. Then the invitations arrived. Crisp white envelopes, gold foil lettering, my name listed in the same font and size as every other guest. No father of the bride. No note or handwritten message. Just a line at the bottom. Mr. Samuel Turner, guest. A few days later, the suit I'd ordered for the wedding came in the mail. Madison had texted me my measurements. "Don't want you looking like a grandpa, Dad!" And picked out the color scheme herself. It fit well enough, but I felt like an imposter in it. A mannequin at a party I was funding but no longer belonged to. As May approached, I called Madison and asked, gently, about walking her down the aisle. There was a pause, then a sigh. "Dad, Tyler and I already planned the procession. I'm walking solo. More modern, more independent, you know?" I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Sure, honey. Whatever you want." My hand shook as I hung up. That night, I found myself sitting on the edge of my bed, staring at my wrinkled hands, wondering when exactly I'd become invisible. Was it when Sarah died? When Madison met Tyler? Or had it started even earlier, with every little compromise I made out of love? 1 week before the big day, the final invoice came, itemized, color-coded, merciless. $50,000, paid in full, not counting the interest I'd carry for years. All that was left was to show up, smile, and try to believe I still belonged somewhere in the picture. The night before the wedding, I sat alone at my kitchen table, the house dark except for one lamp and the steady tick of the clock. In my suit pocket, I tucked the photo of Sarah and me from our own wedding, a black and white snapshot of simpler times. Maybe it was foolish. Maybe all of this was. But sometimes a father just has to do what he can and pray it's enough. The morning of the wedding dawned brighter than I'd hoped, the kind of blue sky Sarah used to call wedding weather. I dressed carefully, trying not to dwell on the ache in my knees or the emptiness of the house as I locked the front door behind me. My suit felt stiff, unfamiliar, a uniform for a role I wasn't sure I could play anymore. I slipped Sarah's photo into my jacket pocket, just over my heart, and tried to smile at my own reflection before heading out. Springfield's downtown was transformed that day. The Grandview Hotel, usually just a big building I drove past on errands, was draped in white and gold, valet attendants hustling about as shiny cars lined the curb. I parked my old Chevy around the corner. Nobody needed to see what real, working-class retirement looked like. Inside, everything was immaculate. White roses on every table, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, and a string quartet playing soft music I couldn't name. The staff moved like clockwork, directing guests, pouring champagne, never missing a beat. I barely recognized anyone. Madison's friends from college, Tyler's business associates, distant relatives who hadn't sent a Christmas card in years. I searched the crowd for a friendly face and found none. An usher, no older than 20, took my invitation and smiled politely. "Right this way, Mr. Turner. You're at table 17, toward the back." I managed a smile and made my way to my seat, passing tables full of laughter and chatter, none of it meant for me. It felt strange to be a stranger at my own daughter's wedding. The ceremony was beautiful, I'll give them that. Madison looked radiant in her dress, something designer and sleek, nothing like the lace and pearls Sarah wore so many years ago. She walked down the aisle alone, head high, bouquet steady. For a moment I saw her as a little girl again, running through the backyard with a daisy chain in her hair. That vision vanished as she reached the altar, greeted by Tyler's wide grin and the approving gaze of his family seated front and center. I watched the vows from afar, listening as they promised each other devotion, partnership, and adventure. Not a word about family, not a word about gratitude. I tried not to take it personally, but the ache in my chest said otherwise. When the rings were exchanged and the kiss was met with applause, I clapped along, doing my best to be happy for them, or at least to look the part. As the guests filed out toward the ballroom for the reception, I hung back, trying to compose myself. That's when Tyler's uncle, Mr. Douglas Bennett, arrived in a flurry of attention. He was everything Tyler wasn't, older, dignified, silver-haired with a booming laugh that filled the room. People flocked to him instantly, hanging on every word. "Sam Turner, isn't it?" he said, striding up to me with a firm handshake. Heard you're the hero behind all this. Congratulations, old friend. I smiled, unsure if he meant the finances or something deeper. Just trying to do right by my girl, sir. He nodded. That's what fathers do. Don't let anyone make you feel otherwise. For a fleeting moment, I felt seen. The ballroom was pure spectacle. Crystal chandeliers, velvet curtains, tables set with more silverware than I knew how to use. The guests swirled about in elegant clothes, laughter echoing off marble floors. My seat at table 17 offered a perfect view of the backs of other people's heads and the dessert buffet being quietly set up by the kitchen doors. Dinner arrived in courses, tiny, beautiful plates of food I couldn't pronounce. The servers whisked them away almost as quickly as they appeared. The real show began when the toast started. First came the maid of honor, Madison's college roommate, with a speech about sorority parties and late-night study sessions. Then Tyler's best man, a fellow lawyer, with jokes about late briefs and billable hours. Then Tyler stood up, champagne glass in hand, and tapped the microphone. The room hushed. Even the servers paused. I want to thank everyone for coming, Tyler began, his voice too smooth, too rehearsed. Especially Madison's dad, Sam Turner, who made all of this possible, literally. Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. My cheeks burned. Not every father would go so far for his daughter. I mean, it takes a certain kind of courage to take out a loan at 70. More laughter, this time sharper. I felt eyes turn my way. Tyler kept going, riding the wave of attention. And of course, he wanted a little something in return, a guest at our wedding. But Madison and I had a vision, and we all know how hard it is to let go of old traditions, right? The laughter grew uneasy, and I saw a few guests exchange glances. Tyler didn't notice. So let's raise a glass to Sam Turner, the man who made this night possible, and who, I hope, enjoys every minute from his seat in the back. People clapped, unsure whether to join in. I forced a smile and nodded, swallowing the bitterness rising in my throat. That was the moment it hit me. My sacrifice wasn't just invisible, it was a punchline. As the clapping died down, Mr. Bennett, Tyler's uncle, stood suddenly. He walked to the head table, eyes blazing. He took the microphone before Tyler could say another word. Before we go any further, he said, his voice echoing through the ballroom, I think there's a story that needs telling. One about what family really means. One about gratitude. And about real courage, the kind you don't find in bank statements or guest lists. The room grew still, the tension thick as velvet. Tyler's smile faded, replaced by a nervous flicker. I looked up and saw Mr. Bennett's eyes lock on mine, warm, fierce, and full of something I hadn't felt all night, respect. In that instant, I knew something was about to change. The ballroom was quiet, not even the clink of a fork or a whisper from the guests. Every head turned toward Douglas Bennett as he stood tall at the head table, the microphone held steady in his sure grip. Even the string quartet in the corner seemed to hold its breath. I'd like to speak for a moment about sacrifice, Mr. Bennett began, his gaze sweeping over the crowd, landing briefly on Tyler, then settling on me at table 17. Not the kind you measure in dollars or grand gestures, but the kind you build your life around. The kind that happens quietly, every day, because of love. He paused, letting the words sink in. Tyler fidgeted, his bravado draining away under the weight of his uncle's tone. Most of you know me as Tyler's uncle. You know my story, restaurants, business, the so-called American dream. But that's not why I'm standing here. I'm standing here because I was raised by a man who believed you could tell everything you need to know about a person by the way they treat their family. Especially when nobody's watching. I saw several guests nod, drawn in by his sincerity. Mr. Bennett took a breath and continued, voice lower, deeper. Let me tell you about Sam Turner. He gestured toward me, and for the first time that evening, all eyes were on me, not as a punchline, but as a person. 30 years ago, long before most of you met him, Sam was working as a shop teacher. He wasn't rich, but he was proud. He was the man who fixed your lawnmower, who built your mailbox, who'd shovel your sidewalk after a storm without being asked. But most of all, he was there for his family, always. He looked at Madison, who had gone pale, her eyes shining with the first tears I'd seen all night. Now, I know Sam didn't run into a burning building or save anyone's life in the literal sense, though God knows, he would have if he'd needed to. No, his sacrifice was slower, quieter. He worked 2 jobs so Madison could go to college. He sat up late with her through heartbreak and homework. He gave up vacations, dinners out, new clothes, all so his daughter would have every opportunity he never did. I felt a lump form in my throat. The old ache of missing Sarah, the pride and pain of every year as a single dad, the long nights and harder mornings, they all came rushing back. And then, Mr. Bennet said, raising his voice a notch, when the time came for her to start a new chapter, he gave everything he had, literally everything. He cashed in his savings, pawned his keepsakes, even borrowed against his future, all to give his daughter the wedding she dreamed of. The crowd shifted, murmurs moving like a ripple across the room. Tyler looked down, his face suddenly unreadable. Madison reached for his hand, her own shaking. But what did he ask in return? Mr. Bennet's eyes flashed. Not recognition. Not control. Just a seat at the table, a chance to share in the happiness he'd worked a lifetime to create. A father's place in his daughter's story. He let that hang in the air. I saw people dabbing at their eyes, husbands reaching for their wives' hands under the table. The staff, still as statues, listened as intently as the guests. I've known a lot of successful men, Douglas Bennet finished, his voice breaking just a little. But I've known very few great ones. Sam Turner is one of those rare men. He gives and gives and gives, not because he expects anything in return, but because that's what love does. The silence after his words was thunderous. I felt every eye on me, not with pity, but with new understanding. My heart beat so loud I thought it might shake my old chest apart. Finally, Mr. Bennet set the microphone down and walked over to my table. He reached out, and I stood on shaking legs. He gripped my hand with both of his, looked me in the eye, and said quietly for only me to hear, "You're the kind of father every man should hope to be." Around us, the room burst into applause, not polite, not forced, but real. Some people stood, others just clapped, nodding at me like I'd done something impossible. Madison covered her face with her hands, weeping openly, while Tyler just sat, stunned, his facade broken at last. I tried to smile, my cheeks wet with tears I hadn't planned on shedding. All those years, all that effort, all that invisible love, it finally mattered. At last, someone had seen me. But the night wasn't over. Mr. Bennet returned to the head table and gestured for Tyler to come join him. The ballroom was still. I watched as my son-in-law, who only moments ago had used me for a laugh, now walked like a schoolboy to his uncle's side. Douglas put a hand on Tyler's shoulder, leaned in, and spoke just loud enough for everyone to hear. "Family isn't about who writes the biggest check," he said. "It's about who shows up year after year, even when there's nothing left to give. It's about respect, especially for the people who made you who you are." Tyler swallowed hard, nodding, his eyes glistening. The microphone was passed to him, but for once, he had no speech ready, just an apology trembling at the edge of his lips. Tyler's hand shook as he took the microphone, the bravado and easy laughter gone from his face. For the first time since I'd known him, he looked young, really young and scared. The room watched in a heavy hush as he tried to find his voice. Even Madison seemed to shrink beside him, her tears drying but her eyes pleading with him for something honest. I'm sorry," Tyler finally managed, his voice barely more than a whisper at first. He cleared his throat, tried again, a little louder. I'm sorry, Sam. Mr. Turner. I was wrong. He looked out over the sea of guests, and when his gaze found me, it didn't flinch away. I thought this wedding was about proving something, about putting on a show, about getting everything just right. I forgot what actually matters. He glanced down, then up again, searching for the right words. I was selfish. I was proud. I used your generosity as a punchline. But the truth is, none of this would be here, none of us would be here, if it weren't for you. There was a quiet murmur from the crowd, a few sniffles, the sound of someone setting down a glass with trembling hands. Tyler turned to Madison, his voice steadier now. I let my own pride get in the way. I forgot that this day was built on love, on your father's sacrifice, on everything he's done for you, for us. I promise, from this moment on, I will never take that for granted again. He turned back to the crowd, his eyes red but resolute. And I want everyone here to know, his voice rose with new strength, that the greatest man in this room tonight is sitting right back there. He's not at the head table. He didn't demand the spotlight. But everything you see, every flower, every note of music, every bite of food, none of it would exist without Sam Turner. He stepped away from the mic, walked across the room, no longer the polished groom but just a man, humbled. He stopped in front of me, reached out his hand. I'm sorry, Dad. Please, can you forgive me? For a moment, I couldn't speak. My whole life flashed before me in an instant, fixing bikes in the driveway, teaching Madison to tie her shoes, staying up late to help her with algebra, sitting alone at kitchen tables in the silence after Sarah passed away. Every sacrifice, every quiet moment, every doubt, suddenly it all had meaning. I stood up and took Tyler's hand, felt the grip, strong and shaking at the same time. I could have made a speech. I could have told him how much it hurt, how lonely it felt to give so much and see so little in return. But that wasn't my way. My father taught me, sometimes the best thing a man can do is simply stand up, forgive, and keep moving forward. Of course I forgive you, son, I said, my voice cracking. Family is what you choose to build, every single day. There was no applause this time, just a quiet, reverent silence as Tyler pulled me into a tight embrace, the kind I never thought I'd get from him. Madison joined us, her arms around us both, crying softly. I'm so sorry, Dad, she whispered. I should have listened. I should have remembered who I am, who you are. I kissed her forehead. You're my girl. That's all that matters. I'd do it all again, 1,000 times. The moment broke the ice in the room. People rose from their chairs, some wiping their eyes, others shaking my hand as I made my way forward, suddenly at the center of a celebration I nearly missed. Guests I'd never met before thanked me, told me their own stories of fathers and forgiveness. Even the staff seemed to move with more warmth, smiling as they served the next course, music swelling again as the tension finally lifted. For the first time all night, I felt welcome, not as a sponsor, but as a father, a friend, a man who'd done something right. Mr. Bennett caught my eye across the room, giving me a small, knowing nod. His speech had changed everything, not just for me, but for everyone in the ballroom. There's power in being seen, really seen, not for your money or your mistakes, but for your heart. For the life you've lived, and the love you've given. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of laughter, dancing, and stories shared. I was introduced over and over as the man of the night. Madison made sure I had a seat at the head table for dessert. Tyler poured me a glass of champagne himself. When the band played the first slow song, Madison took my hand and led me onto the dance floor. Dad, this is your moment too, she said, resting her head on my shoulder. We swayed together, father and daughter, the way I dreamed of when she was a little girl. The worries, the sacrifices, the loneliness, they faded into the music, replaced by something stronger, hope, redemption. The quiet, steady love that endures, no matter what. I glanced upward, as if Sarah might be watching, and for a moment I could almost feel her hand in mine, guiding me through the steps, reminding me that even when life hurts, it's worth every second for the people you love. The night was far from over, and as I looked out over the sea of smiling faces, I realized it wasn't just a wedding anymore. It was a new beginning, for all of us. The wedding that began as a storm of tension and regret turned, almost miraculously, into an evening none of us would ever forget. By the time the dancing ended and the lights dimmed, I wasn't just a bystander or a checkbook. I was Madison's father again, and Tyler's family for the first time in truth. After that emotional dance with Madison, I found myself surrounded by old friends and new acquaintances alike. The florist shook my hand and said she'd never seen a more heartfelt celebration. The hotel manager brought me a plate of extra dessert and insisted I sit at the head table as long as I pleased. Even Tyler's colleagues from Chicago, who'd barely glanced my way all night, stopped to thank me for reminding them what weddings and family were all about. Tyler was never far away, hovering near Madison and me, always ready with a drink, a chair, or an apology that came not just from his lips but from the humble way he moved around the room. He introduced me to his uncle again, but this time as the man who made me rethink everything. Douglas Bennett smiled, his arm around my shoulder, and whispered, "You've got a rare gift, Sam. You give people the courage to face themselves." I thanked him, but the truth was, I didn't feel brave. I just felt like a father who'd nearly lost everything that mattered, but somehow, by the grace of God and the kindness of one wise uncle, got it all back in the span of a single speech. Late into the night, when most of the guests had gone, I found a quiet spot outside under the string lights and the wide, starry Missouri sky. Madison came and sat beside me, her wedding dress trailing on the patio stones, her makeup long since washed away by tears. "Dad," she said, her voice softer than I'd heard in years, "I don't know how I let things get so far away from what matters." I smiled and patted her hand. "It happens, sweetheart. The world's louder than it's ever been, makes it easy to forget what's right in front of us." She leaned into me, resting her head on my shoulder just like when she was a child. "Thank you for never giving up on me, even when I didn't deserve it." I felt the sting of tears again, but this time they were warm, a kind of healing I didn't expect. "A father's job never ends, Maddie. Love's not about keeping score. It's about showing up, over and over, even when it's hard." She squeezed my hand, and for a long time we just sat in silence, listening to the distant laughter of the last guests and the wind in the trees. "I miss Mom," she whispered at last. I looked up at the sky, the stars as clear as I'd ever seen. "So do I every day. But she's here, right in the middle of all this. In you, in me, in the way this family picked itself up tonight." Madison smiled through her tears. "Promise me you'll always be there, Dad. For everything. Nothing could keep me away," I said, and meant it with every fiber of my old, stubborn heart. Eventually, Tyler joined us, jacket off, tie askew, more himself than I'd ever seen him. "Mr. Turner, Sam," he corrected himself. "Thank you. Not just for tonight. For giving me a second chance. For loving Madison enough to remind her, and me, what real love is." I looked him in the eye, seeing finally not a rival or a stranger, but the man my daughter chose. "Your family, Tyler. It's not about being perfect. It's about being honest, learning when you're wrong, and making it right." He nodded, sitting beside us, the three of us wrapped in the hush of the early morning. The night air was cool, but I felt warmer than I had in years. Inside, the hotel staff was quietly packing away the last of the decorations, and the band played one final slow tune. Some of the guests wandered out onto the lawn, dancing under the stars, no longer worried about appearances or perfection. For the first time all day, it felt like a real family gathering, not a show. Madison took off her shoes and danced with Tyler in the grass, her laughter free and unburdened. I watched them, my heart full, thinking how life could bring you so close to losing everything you love, and then, in the space of a few honest words and open hearts, give it all back and more. I took out the old photo of Sarah and me, the one I'd carried in my suit all night. I pressed it to my chest, whispering a thank you for the years we had, and for this night, a night when love, battered and bruised, finally found its way home again. As dawn crept over Springfield and the last lights of the Grandview Hotel flickered out, I walked my daughter to the car, hugged Tyler, and felt, for the first time in a long time, that I belonged exactly where I was. The wedding was over, but something better had begun. The sun rose slow and gentle over Springfield, sending golden light through the kitchen windows of my little house, warming the old wood floors and the photos on the fridge. My body ached in the familiar way it always did after a long day and an even longer night, but my heart was lighter than it had been in years. I brewed a pot of coffee, the rich smell filling the house, and sat down at the kitchen table with Sarah's photo and the wedding invitation propped beside me. It almost felt like a dream, everything that had happened the night before, the way things turned in a single, powerful moment of truth and forgiveness. A few hours later, Madison called. I could hear her smile through the phone. "Morning, Dad. You awake?" "Been up since sunrise." "Old habits." I chuckled, taking a sip of coffee. "How's the happy couple?" She laughed, sounding more like the daughter I remembered from years ago. "We're exhausted and can't stop smiling. Tyler says hi and thank you again. He's making breakfast. He still can't cook, but he's trying." That made me laugh, a real, belly-deep laugh. "Tell him to use low heat, and maybe order takeout as backup." We talked for a long time, about little things and big ones. Madison promised to visit next week, to come home for dinner like old times. "Just us," she said. "No wedding planners, no stress. You, me, Tyler, and a home-cooked meal. That's all I want." When we finally hung up, I sat for a while, lost in the quiet peace that comes when the storm is finally over. I thought about all those years I'd worried whether I'd done enough, worked enough, loved enough, provided enough. I thought about the sacrifices, the mistakes, the loneliness. But now, looking back, I saw something else, how every act of love, no matter how small, had found its way back to me, in the eyes of my daughter and the words of a once proud son-in-law finally humbled. That week, I started living again. I joined Mrs. Hendricks for bingo on Wednesday nights and went fishing with my old friend Carl. On Saturday mornings, I baked bread, just the way Sarah used to, filling the house with the smell of home. Sometimes I caught myself humming an old tune or talking to Sarah's photo, telling her about Madison's new life, about Tyler's awkward pancakes, about the way family can break your heart and mend it again. And Madison kept her promise. She and Tyler came over every Sunday, arms full of groceries, laughter, and stories. Sometimes we'd cook together, sometimes we'd just sit in the backyard, watching the birds, letting the silence settle comfortably between us. Tyler and I grew closer, not because we agreed on everything, but because we'd learned something essential, that forgiveness is the glue that holds families together, and respect is the soil where love can finally grow. The wedding bills still arrived in the mail, of course, reminders of how far I'd gone for my girl. But they didn't sting the way they once did. Each payment was a chapter in a story I was proud to have written. A story of sacrifice, humility, and finally, recognition. A month after the wedding, Madison surprised me with a photo album. The cover was embossed with gold letters. "For Dad, the real heart of our family." Inside were photos of the wedding, yes, but also snapshots of our lives. Old birthdays, Christmas mornings, Sarah's smile, Madison's first day of school, and tucked in the back, a letter from Tyler. I opened it, heart pounding a little. "Dear Sam, thank you for loving Madison, for loving me, for never giving up even when I deserved it least. I'm proud to call you Dad, and I promise to spend the rest of my life making sure you know how much you mean to both of us. With gratitude, Tyler. My eyes blurred with tears, but this time, they were happy ones. That night, as I set the album on the coffee table, I looked around my little house, so ordinary, so full of memories, and knew that it wasn't just the walls or the roof that made it home. It was the love we'd built, the forgiveness we'd shared, and the lessons learned, not just by Madison and Tyler, but by me as well. As the stars blinked to life over Missouri, I whispered a quiet prayer of thanks, to Sarah, to God, to the long road that led us here. I understood, finally, that being a father isn't about the money you spend or the sacrifices you make in silence. It's about showing up, again and again, loving when it's hard, forgiving when it's needed, and letting your family find their way back, no matter how far they've wandered. That was my story. Not perfect, not always easy, but real, and in the end, that's what mattered most. So if you ever find yourself sitting alone in the quiet, wondering if you matter, remember this: love is never wasted, sacrifice is never forgotten, and family is always worth fighting for. Even when it takes everything you have, sometimes that's when it gives you everything in return.